Welcome back. In this video we are going to finish off our dome lid. In the last video you watched how to throw a dome lid and how to make the inside shape like that. Now we're going to finish it off, we're going to trim it and throw a knob on the top. Alright, so here's my dome lid down here. It's leather hard, so it's ready for trimming, just like you would trim a T-bolt. So step one, I'm going to make sure it's on center. I've centered it using the concentric rings on the wheel head, but I'm just going to double check. Yep, good, that's nicely centered. If it's not centered, remember again, you give to the thick, take from the thin, so that it is the right size. I'm going to need my needle tool later. Okay, I'm going to secure it in place with some lugs. Remember, as you press down on the wheel head, try not to bump it out of shape. And you're going to need to have a pre-prepared extra chunk of clay for the handle for your lid. So I'm just going to set that aside for now and grab my trimming tool and start trimming. Alright, so for trimming, you're going to do just the same thing as you would if you were trimming a T-bolt. Start by making it flat, just so you don't get bumped out of shape. And then start coming, instead of coming from the side like I normally would for a foot, I just come right down here and trim that corner away and trim more of that corner away, trim more of the corner away, and I keep going back and taking little bits of that corner off and angling my tool a little bit more and more until I get the rounded shape that I want at the top. Now, if you wanted just a dome lid for the future, you know, like an urn or something, they usually have dome lids without, because they're not really meant to be lifted up that often. You could leave it like this. But since we're making a sugar jar, which will be lifted up quite often, probably, you're going to trim that edge. And you don't want to actually make it too thin. You want to leave yourself just a little bit of room. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to throw a little chunk onto the top. So I'm actually going to score and slip. So here's my scoring. I'm going to take a little bit of the throwing bucket debris for my slip and put that on. Stop my wheel. Take my little pre-prepared chunk of clay and squish it down onto my slipped and scored piece of clay. Now, one thing about this is you don't want to make your lid too thin, because then as you're attaching this piece of clay, it might have a tendency to collapse in on itself. So once you get it attached as well as you feel like you can, turn your wheel back on, and you're going to center that little lump of clay. Okay? For this, you might need to just use your fingertips. So I'm just going to gently start pressing on this clay, and I'm going to center it up. And as I bring this clay to center, I'm just going to be thinking I really only need to cone it. I don't need to get too fancy. I need to cone it, I might compress it, but I'm going to just press this clay down, make sure that it's like nicely attached between the joint here at the chunk of clay and where it meets the lid. And then I can start to increase my speed now that it's nicely attached. I can increase the speed a little bit, and I can actually throw with it. Now you can manipulate this little chunk of clay and make it kind of into any form you want. On this example here, you can see there's a nubbin at the top where this, you could grab underneath that in order to hold it. This one is a little bit, on the smoother hourglass shape size. Whatever you want. You should have a top that is comfortable to hold and hopefully will also look nice and function well. Okay, whether you want to have like a domed top above and an undercut side here, or if you want to have it thin and then thick again at the bottom, it should have a nubbin on top for easy grabbing. Okay, so there I've just kind of almost used like collaring, like you would for a cylinder, just to collar that bit in, and then I've just kind of compressed the top and shaped it using my fingers and thumb, and now we have our little nubbin on the top. So I'll use a sponge just to wipe it and get it nice and smooth and even. And if I just bend this camera down, bear with me, there's the nice profile shape. All right, now that you're done with the profile shape, it's already leather hard. So I'm gonna take off my lid, and at this point you can use a knife if you want, a fettling knife if you want to, and go back to the tables and make your hole the way you want. Or if you have your jar and your jar is also leather hard, you can take your jar and you can use a needle tool and simply trace out the shape of the hole that you want for the spoon, for the sugar spoon. If you like I said, if you're making a storage jar, you might not actually want a hole in it. So depending on what assignment you're going for and what your final plan was when you started, you may or may not want to cut a slot in here. But since this assignment originally was a sugar jar, and sugar jars usually have a spoon in them, I'm going to cut this spoon slot. Like so. Okay, so now I've got the spoon slot in there. Smooth it out. Now, if you're making a million of these, literally trying to be a production potter and making a bunch of them in one day, you would want to maybe come up with some kind of a tool that you could cut that slot out with evenly and the same each time. But since we're only making one, because it's just level 2 ceramics, you can cut that slot in using a needle tool or a fettling knife. So that's how to finish the dome lid jar for Ceramics 2's sugar jar and lid project.